You know what's funny about the NFL? The most explosive stories, the ones that absolutely break the internet, the ones that get people screaming at their phones and sharing clips and tagging their friends at 2 in the morning. They never start where you think they start. They never begin with a press conference or an official announcement or some carefully crafted statement from a publicist. They start in a room, a private room, a meeting room where nobody is supposed to be filming, nobody is supposed to be talking, and everything said is supposed to stay exactly where it was said. And then, somehow, always somehow, it gets out. And when it gets out, it doesn't trickle out quietly. It explodes. And the explosion that followed what Shedeur Sanders allegedly said about Tom Brady in a pre-draft meeting last spring is still, right now, today, on March 20th of 2026, sending shockwaves through the football world in ways that nobody fully anticipated. Because here is what people forget about this story. Here is what gets lost in all the hot takes and the social media arguments and the ESPN debate segments. This wasn't just a funny anecdote that leaked out of a pre-draft interview. This wasn't just a 24-year-old kid saying something edgy to try to impress a room full of scouts. This was, according to the people who say they know exactly what happened, one of the most consequential sentences ever spoken in an NFL draft meeting room. A sentence that allegedly cost Shedeur Sanders his first-round draft position, that turned Tom Brady, his own mentor, the man who was supposed to be in his corner, into someone who reportedly hasn't spoken to him since, and that set off a chain of events so dramatic, so wild, so genuinely unbelievable, that even now, more than a year later, the full impact is still being felt every single day inside the Cleveland Browns quarterback room. So let's go all the way back, because this story doesn't start with the joke, it starts with the relationship, and you cannot understand how far things fell without first understanding how close they were. Tom Brady and Shedeur Sanders, before all of this, before the draft, before the controversy, before the internet erupted, had a genuine relationship, a mentorship. Brady had worked with Sanders during the pre-draft process, spending time with him, coaching him, investing in his development in the way that only someone who has lived the quarterback experience at the absolute highest level can. Brady went from being the 199th overall pick in the NFL draft to winning 7 Super Bowls and becoming the greatest player in the history of professional football. He is the single best example in the history of the sport that draft position means absolutely nothing, that where you are taken tells you nothing about what you are capable of becoming. Dogs by nature, and that story, that specific, powerful, perfectly resonant story, made Brady the ideal mentor for Shedeur Sanders, heading into what everyone expected would be a triumphant draft process for a player projected to go in the top 10.
Brady knew Shedeur, knew his talent, knew his family, knew the Deion Sanders dynamic and what it meant for a young quarterback trying to establish his own identity separate from his father's towering legacy. And Shedeur, by all accounts, genuinely valued that relationship, genuinely looked up to Brady, genuinely took the mentorship seriously. These were not two strangers performing a photo op for social media. This was a real connection between two quarterbacks from completely different generations, one at the absolute end of his playing career, the other standing at the very beginning of his. And then came the pre-draft meetings, the NFL Combine, the team visits, the 30-minute meetings in hotel rooms and facility conference rooms where prospects sit across from coaches and general managers and try to present themselves as professionally and impressively as possible. These meetings are crucial. They are where franchises decide, beyond the tape, beyond the statistics, beyond everything that happens on the field, whether they want this person in their building, whether they trust this person, whether they believe this person has the character and the maturity and the leadership qualities to be the face of their organization. And for Shedeur Sanders, who was already generating more pre-draft controversy than almost any prospect in recent memory, these meetings were not just important, they were absolutely critical. And then something happened in one of those meetings, something that, depending on who you believe and how you interpret it, either was a massive, devastating, unforced error, or was a completely innocent comment that got weaponized by people with their own agendas. Skip Bayless, the veteran sports media personality, claimed to have a very close source who told him what happened inside a meeting between Shedeur Sanders and the New York Giants. According to Bayless, Sanders made a comment about Tom Brady, specifically joking about Brady's personal life, about Gisele Bündchen cheating on Brady with her trainer, about the divorce that had been one of the most public and painful stories in the celebrity world for years. Bayless claimed that Sanders suggested Brady would be the last person he would take life advice from. Pro Football Network. Let that land for a second. In a pre-draft meeting, with an NFL franchise deciding whether to spend a first-round pick on him, Shedeur Sanders allegedly made a joke at Tom Brady's expense about Brady's marriage, about his divorce, about his personal life, about the most painful chapter of the most famous quarterback's post-playing existence. Bayless said this got back to Brady, and that Brady and Sanders haven't spoken since.
Now, I want to be really careful here because this story is complicated by the fact that everything about it comes through layers of sources and interpretations and people with their own interests in how the narrative gets shaped. Skip Bayless is not a neutral observer. He is a provocateur by profession. He says things designed to generate maximum reaction. And his claim about what Sanders said in that Giants meeting room came from an anonymous source. Not from a video, not from a recording, not from a first-hand account by someone whose credibility is beyond question. And when Brady himself was asked about it, when he sat down on the Impulsive podcast with Logan Paul and the whole mess was laid out in front of him, his response was fascinating. Brady was asked directly about Sanders' draft slide and his alleged role in it. He stammered. He struggled. He eventually said, "I wasn't a part of any evaluation process or to see that." When one of the podcast hosts said, "Skip Bayless says otherwise," Brady responded, "I know, well, everyone's got that's the problem with media, is everyone can just say whatever the fuck they want. Dogs by nature. Everyone can just say whatever they want. That is not a denial. Let me be clear about that. That is not Tom Brady looking into a camera and saying, I had nothing to do with Shedeur Sanders' draft slide, and the story Skip Bayless is telling is completely false. That is Tom Brady expressing frustration with the media and declining to directly address the substance of the allegation. And when the greatest quarterback in NFL history, who is famously careful with his words, who is famously precise in his public communications, declines to give a direct denial, people notice, people pay attention, and the conversation does not go away. Brady did eventually share what he said he actually did after the draft. He said, "I actually texted Shedeur because I know him very well, and I said, dude, whatever happens, wherever you go, that's your first day. Day 2 matters more than the draft." Heavy sports. Day 2 matters more than the draft. It's a good message, a genuinely good, thoughtful, mentorship-style message from someone who has lived the experience of being overlooked and building something extraordinary despite it. Brady went from 199th overall to 7 Super Bowls. He knows better than anyone alive that draft position doesn't determine destiny. But here's the thing. The fact that Brady texted Sanders after the draft, a warm, supportive, forward-looking text message, does not resolve the underlying question. Did something happen between them before the draft? Did what Shedeur allegedly said in that Giants meeting room make its way back to Brady? Did that conversation, or the absence of it, the silence that reportedly followed, play any role in how teams evaluated Shedeur Sanders heading into draft day? An anonymous source close to Brady pushed back hard against Bayless, specifically. The source told the Daily Mail, "Tom thinks that Skip Bayless is an idiot for thinking he had anything to do with Shedeur's downfall in the NFL draft. Tom has limited say in what players the Raiders pick, or whoever they sign. It is just stupid banter." Heavy sports. Tom has limited say. Not, this story is completely false and nothing like what Bayless described ever happened. Not, Shedeur never made any comment about Brady in any meeting room, just, Tom has limited say in what the Raiders pick, which addresses one specific element of the accusation, whether Brady directly told the Raiders to pass on Sanders, without touching the broader question of what was allegedly said and whether it affected Sanders' perception around the league. And Brady himself added fuel to the fire in a completely separate interview, one that seemed completely innocent on the surface, but that NFL fans and analysts immediately connected to the Sanders situation. He said, "When a quarterback throws a touchdown pass, I actually watch to see who he goes and celebrates with. Yard barker. Who he celebrates with. Team-first mindset." The kind of comment that Brady makes regularly because it reflects his genuine philosophy about what makes great quarterbacks great. But in the context of the Shedeur-Sanders controversy, in the context of all the questions about Sanders' pre-draft interviews and his interpersonal dynamics and the anonymous coaches who called him dismissive and aloof, those words hit differently. They read as commentary, not neutral philosophy. Commentary.
And NFL fans heard them exactly that way. Online, the reaction was immediate. People connected Brady's comment about watching who quarterbacks celebrate with directly to the perception that had been building around Sanders throughout the pre-draft process, that he was too focused on himself, that he didn't prioritize team dynamics, that the entitled label some anonymous coaches had attached to him reflected something real about how he presents in private settings. And then, on top of all of this, on top of the Bayless allegation and the impulsive podcast and the celebration comment, Tom Brady dropped what became known as the brutal reality check on Shedeur-Sanders fans. After Sanders made his first NFL appearance and struggled, with fans and Deion Sanders himself suggesting that Shedeur hadn't been given enough practice reps with the starters, Brady essentially said, "Get over it." His message, amplified by Marcellus Wiley, was direct. Wiley wrote, "For all the well-intended Shedeur-Sanders enablers, the GOAT Tom Brady started his NFL career getting 2 reps as the third-string QB, none with the starters. Welcome to the NFL." Brady backed that message and added, "And I'd go in and I'd say, well, how can I ever get better? All these guys get all the reps and I only get 2. And he said, just go in there and focus with the 2 that you got and make them as perfect as you possibly can." Dogs by nature. Now, is that a call-out? Is that Tom Brady specifically targeting Shedeur-Sanders and saying publicly that Sanders and his supporters need to stop making excuses? Or is it Brady making a general philosophical point about how great quarterbacks adapt to difficult circumstances, a point that happens to be directly relevant to the Sanders situation, but wasn't necessarily aimed at him? The answer, like almost everything in this story, depends entirely on who you ask. The people who believe the original Bayless allegation, who believe Brady played some role in shaping the NFL's perception of Sanders before the draft, who believe there's real friction between these two men, they heard Brady's reality check as pointed, targeted, a shot fired with plausible deniability but clear aim. The people who take Brady at his word, who think Bayless invented or wildly embellished the Giants meeting story, who believe Brady is simply a football philosopher sharing universal wisdom, they heard it as genuinely neutral advice that the internet chose to weaponize. But here's what neither side can deny. The controversy that surrounds the Brady-Sanders relationship is not going away. It was not resolved by the impulsive appearance. It was not resolved by the anonymous source calling Bayless an idiot. It was not resolved by Brady's supportive text message after the draft, or his general philosophical comments about quarterback leadership. It lives in the space between what was allegedly said and what was officially denied. And that space, that unresolved, unverifiable, endlessly debatable space, is where the most powerful viral controversies always live. And today, right now, on March 20th, 2026, a new chapter just got added.
Brady's own Super Bowl champion teammate, Leonard Fournette, came out publicly and called out Kevin Stefanski over the treatment of Shedeur Sanders during the 2025 season. Fournette said on his podcast, "The situation with Stefanski bothers me. The stuff he had going on with Shedeur. If you have a guy there who could be your franchise maker, that can change the organization, not a good look for Stefanski." Not a good look for Stefanski. From a player who is connected to Brady, who won a Super Bowl alongside him, who exists in the same orbit, who understands the mentorship relationship Brady had with Sanders, that statement carries weight, because it is coming from someone inside that world who is saying the way this kid was treated was wrong. The way he was managed, the way opportunities were withheld, the way the organization handled what could have been their franchise quarterback, that was wrong, and it needs to be said out loud. And in the context of the Brady controversy, in the context of everything that has been alleged and denied and debated over the last 11 months, Fournette's comments feel more than just criticism of a fired head coach. They feel like more broader statement about the way the system treated Shedeur Sanders. From the draft process to the depth chart to the practice reps to the timing of his first start, at every step, the argument goes, this young man was put in a position to fail rather than to succeed. And now, with Stefanski gone, with Monken in, with the offensive line rebuilt, with free agency having passed without a veteran quarterback being brought in, there is finally, for the first time, something resembling a fair environment for Shedeur Sanders to show what he can do.
But the Brady cloud doesn't go away. And here's why it matters so specifically for where the Cleveland Browns are right now. Because the narrative that Shedeur Sanders bombed his pre-draft interviews, the narrative built around anonymous coaches calling him dismissive and entitled, built around the alleged Brady comment, built around the sense that he rubbed teams the wrong way in private settings, that narrative has never been fully dismantled. It exists. It floats. It shows up every time Andrew Berry declines to commit to Shedeur as QB1. It shows up every time Todd Monken says there's not enough on film yet to make the call. Not because those men are necessarily persuaded by the pre-draft narrative, but because the pre-draft narrative created doubt that on-field performance alone has not yet been sufficient to fully erase. And that's the really interesting, really uncomfortable truth at the heart of this whole controversy. The Brady story, whatever it actually was, whatever really happened in that Giants meeting room, whatever was or was not said, created a perception problem for Shedeur Sanders that goes beyond football. In the NFL, the quarterback position requires more than talent. It requires trust. The coaches have to trust you. The front office has to trust you. The locker room has to trust you. And trust, especially at the highest levels of professional sports, is fragile, especially when the stories being whispered involve a player making a joke about the personal life of the greatest quarterback who ever played the game, especially when those whispers never get officially, definitively, completely denied. Brady himself, in his clearest, most direct moment of the entire controversy, tried to position himself as someone who wanted good things for Sanders. He told the Impulsive hosts, "I actually texted Shedeur because I know him very well, and I said, dude, whatever happens wherever you go, that's your first day. Day 2 matters more than the draft." Dogs by nature, day 2 matters more than the draft, and Brady lived that. Brady was 199th overall. Brady sat behind Drew Bledsoe for years. Brady got his chance when Bledsoe went down with an injury in 2001 and turned it into 7 Super Bowls and the greatest career in NFL history. He is, by any measure, the ultimate embodiment of the idea that where you start means nothing compared to what you do when you get your chance. And now Shedeur Sanders is living his version of that same story. He didn't get the draft position he deserved. He sat on the bench. He waited. He got his chance when Gabriel got hurt in November, and he won games. He made the Pro Bowl. He finished the season as the starter.
And now, with a rebuilt offensive line, a new head coach, an open competition, and the whole football world watching, he is standing at the exact moment where Brady says day 2 begins. The question is whether the Brady controversy, the lingering, unresolved viral question of what really happened between these two men and what role it played in one of the biggest draft surprises in NFL history, follows him into that competition. Whether it becomes background noise that fades as the performances pile up, or whether it continues to be the story that frames everything else, the narrative lens through which every interception, every sack, every difficult moment in the 2026 season gets interpreted. Because that is how NFL narratives work. Once a story takes hold, once an idea about who a player is gets embedded in the culture, it takes extraordinary, sustained, undeniable performance to dislodge it. Brady knows that better than anyone. Brady had his own narrative problems early in his career, questions about his athleticism, his arm strength, his ability to be a long-term starter. He answered them with wins, with Super Bowls, with 17 years of dominance so complete that it became impossible to sustain any alternative narrative. He didn't just prove the doubters wrong, he made the doubting seem absurd in retrospect. Shedeur Sanders needs to do the same thing, not by addressing the Brady controversy directly, not by going on podcasts to rebut Skip Bayless, not by getting into a public back and forth about what was or was not said in a Giants meeting room, but by doing what Brady always did, going out on the field, making the plays, winning the games, and making the pre-draft stories, the anonymous critics, the viral controversies, making all of it look completely and utterly irrelevant in the face of what he actually does with a football in his hands when it matters. Brady's own message, the one he dropped as a reality check, the one that became a whole controversy in itself, contained the exact blueprint Shedeur Sanders needs to follow. Brady said about his own experience as a third-string rookie, just go in there and focus with the 2 that you got and make them as perfect as you possibly can. Dogs by nature, 2 reps, make them perfect. Don't complain about the situation. Don't focus on what you're not getting. Focus on what you have and make it as perfect as it can possibly be. If Shedeur Sanders takes that message, if he walks into Todd Monken's offense in April's off-season program and does exactly that, if he focuses not on the Brady controversy and not on the depth chart battles and not on any of the noise that surrounds him from every direction, then this story has a different ending than the critics want it to have. If he walks into training camp in July and is the best quarterback in that building every single day, if he wins the competition not on reputation or on draft capital or on fan support, but on pure, undeniable football performance, then the viral controversy with Brady becomes a footnote, a chapter in a much bigger story about a player who overcame everything.
But if the performances don't come, if the 10 interceptions from last year become 15, if the offensive line improvements don't translate into the cleaner, more efficient play that Barry said he needs to see, then the pre-draft narrative will come roaring back. The Brady story will get louder again. The anonymous coaches will feel vindicated. And the question of whether Shedeur Sanders was always going to be exactly what his draft position suggested, a fifth-round talent, not a franchise cornerstone, will not just be whispered anymore. The controversy is real. The stakes are real. And right now, on March 20th, 2026, with the 2026 NFL season 60 days away and the most important quarterback competition in Cleveland's history about to begin, the story of Shedeur Sanders and Tom Brady is not finished, not even close. Every touchdown Shedeur throws in 2026 is an answer. Every interception is a question. And every time he steps under center in an NFL game, in Todd Monken's new system, behind a rebuilt offensive line, with the whole city of Cleveland believing in him and the whole football world skeptical of him, the controversy will be there, in the background, waiting to be either proven right or proven irretrievably, permanently, magnificently wrong.
Shedeur Sanders knows what people are saying. He has always known what people are saying. From Jackson State to Colorado to the Green Room to Cleveland, this kid has never had the luxury of being in a room where everyone believed in him. He has always been fighting something, always proving something. And the Brady controversy is just the latest, loudest, most viral version of the same fundamental challenge this young man has faced his entire career. The question is not whether he can handle it. He has proven over and over again that he can handle it. The question is whether 2026, with everything that has been built around him, with the offensive line and the new coach and the cleared path and the rebuilt roster, is finally the year where handling it translates into something permanent, something that makes the controversy stop. Something that makes people stop whispering about Brady and Giants meeting rooms and draft slides and start talking about something entirely different. Winning, games, championships, legacy. That is where this story is going. The Brady controversy lit the fuse. The 2026 season is where we find out what the explosion actually looks like.